Hi there, it's Riikka Kovasin here with another set of posts for Seth Apter Creative Team. This time I'm tackling the 4 new textured pastes. As there's 4 of them, I thought about to have some kind of combining element to the 4 different videos and pastes, so I chose to do 4 elements. In the course of 4 following videos you will see a take on each element. So there's earth, fire, air and water. I used different texture paste for each element. For example, the crackled version for earth and flaky for the fire. But let's get started with today's project, which is earth and the crackle paste. I chose the crackled version for earth as I thought about the really dry ground when it starts crackling. So that gave me the impression of earth. I also wanted to use really earthy, dull tones in that way and also keep the project really matte. As you can see, I'm starting with a really dark background. I'm using black gesso, but color it a little bit using the icing pigment inks. So it's not pure black anymore, there's a set of different hues or tones in it. After drying, then it's time to add a little bit more layers to that background. For that I'm using stenciling, and like with gesso, I also use the icing pigment inks to manipulate the colors a little bit. So for example, I want the yellow tone to be more grayish, a little bit more like shade, so I add a little bit black to it, and where the gray is concerned, I add some warmth to it by using 2 different tones of icing pigment ink. Then I use a sponge and 2 different stencils to add some pattern to the background. The first stencil is by Seth Apter and the other one is from my teammate Robin McLendon. Then it's time to introduce the actual texture paste to the project. The textured paste are white as themselves, but you can color them using various mediums. For this project I chose again the icing pigment inks and color the texture paste to 3 different tones. I'm using a palette knife to mix the color into the paste and then also use it to apply the paste to my background. I mix the different colors a little bit on top of the background and then leave it to air dry. Usually air drying results more crackles than if you use a heat tool. But as I found out later on when using a heat tool with this particular paste, it was already dried, but I was able to boil it then with the heat tool and the end result looks almost like leathery, so it's a really cool effect. Now that the background has had some time to dry, I add again icing pigment inks on top to kind of highlight the crackles. I'm using darker tones so they would seep into the crackles, and then I clean the surface so they would highlight the crackles. These worked okay-ish, let's say. They didn't come as visible as I would want them to be, but still it was okay, and also it dulled the colors on top, made it more grayish or more earthy in that way. But I also realized that using a lot of water on top of the textured paste made it react with the moisture. Probably it wasn't dry enough when I started adding the other layer, and that resulted it. But this was my first dry with the paste, so it's always a bit experimenting. But I like to do projects rather than just little experiments when I have new mediums. Then some acrylic layers. As you can see, the center of the project looks quite different compared to the black background, so I need something to tie those 2 together. For that I'm using acrylic paints, but I make them more translucent, more like glazes or washes using a gel medium. As I want my whole project to be as matte as possible, I'm using a matte version of the gel medium. I mix different acrylic paints together, then add the gel medium to them and go over the whole background. I also add a little bit of touches here and there to the center of the project. I also use the mix as an adhesive to add some art stones to my project. They look like little pebbles or sand, so I felt that they will go nicely to this earth theme. After adding the stones in place, I then let the project air dry for a while so that I wouldn't boil the gel medium. But as impatient I am, I then took my heat tool, and this is when I caused the texture medium to boil and create that lovely leathery, like elephant skin looking texture. Then it's time to color the art stones. I'm using the same acrylic paints diluted with water to add them on top of the stones. So the more liquid kind of acrylic paint just pushes through the pebbles and adds more color to the shadowy parts than to the top. I'm using different colors to create that kind of earthy, sandy feel. These 4 projects are more like abstract, so there's not that definite focal point, but even with this first one, I decided that I need something on top, even though there's a lot of you to watch, the different textures and colors. So I added an alchemy symbol of each element to the projects. It's always the same triangle, which is an actual jewelry part, but I use different colors to color the part to kind of fit into the theme. For this project, I used the Seth Apter Metals embossing powder set and chose the crusty copper from the tones. So as the finishing touch, I'm adding that triangle and a little line that goes with the symbol to the piece. So here's my take on the first element and also for the first textured paste. I hope this reminds you of Earth, and I hope I'll be seeing you tomorrow and to following days to see the whole series. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.